Oh hey, welcome to my garden. Come on in. What's going on? In this video, we're gonna be going over what went right and what went wrong in my garden. I don't know if you guys remember the initial gardening video, but here's a little clip of what these tomato plants look like when I put them in versus what they are now. These things have done tremendously in terms of growth. They haven't produced any tomatoes yet though, which is a little concerning, but who knows? You know, maybe that's just how these tomato plants go. So yeah, the tomato plants that I initially put in went splendidly. My Swiss chard and my lettuce. So I've only got the two small lettuce up here in front from the initial planting. And the Swiss chard has done super well. When these first started coming out of the ground, I honestly thought they were weeds, because there's a weed that looks identical to Swiss chard, or at least the red stem Swiss chard here. They both have red stems. They both have the little long leaves that come out of the ground first. And so I almost picked them, but I was like, you know what? We're gonna wait and see, because so many of these weeds that are coming up out of the ground look exactly like a small leaf green. And sure enough, they came up. Some of these are multiple plants in bunches. I think they'll be all right. Boom! Check out those pole beans. When I planted the pole beans, they weren't pole beans. When I planted them, they were just beans. And that is a perfect example of my lack of gardening knowledge initially. Pole beans need a trellis, and I didn't know that. I didn't know they were pole beans. So they started growing really tall, and as they grow taller, they have so much leaf weight, and anytime water gets on those leaves, that the stems will fall over and they can't support themselves. So I made this sort of a makeshift trellis here. Let me give you a close-up of it. There, you can see like it's got strings throughout it, and I just kind of wove the leaves through each string, and it seems to be working at this point. And if it gets to the point where it's not going to work, then I will have to come up with something different. I can also add like another string at the top here for when they get taller. I actually don't know how tall they get, but funny story about the pole beans. I come back here, I'm just, watering my garden, and I look over and one of the pole beans is just smushed. And I have no idea why. I was like, wow, that one must have gotten really heavy. And I come over and I look close, and there's this toad just sitting on top of it, totally blended in with the soil. Now, funny thing about this toad is I'm pretty sure I put it in the garden. I was doing a little stump removal a couple weeks before, and this toad hopped out, so I was like, toads eat critters. I've got a perfect home for you since I took your home away. Put him in the garden. I said, look, you can live here if you eat the bugs, and I'll give you some extras every now and then, and you get a home and I get a protected garden. But he came back a second time and burrowed under there. He really liked being under the cover of the pole beans. Let's talk about these radishes. Actually, you know what? We'll come back to the radishes. My cucumber corn garden. Well, these were bizarre. So about 3 weeks after I planted these cucumbers, this one came up. It might have even been 4 weeks. It took a really long time. And then that was the only thing that came up in this whole garden. A week later, this one came up. A week after that, this one came up. A week after that, this one came up. I don't know. I don't know why their germination rates were so different. And the corn didn't come up. So what you see here, these little things, those are tomatoes I planted recently that are already growing really, really well. So there will be a bunch of big tomatoes over there. Hopefully these cucumbers make it. We're going to talk about why they might not after we go over to that garden. So this big guy is my zucchini plant, and it's the only plant from my initial planting that germinated and grew really well until last night. And that sort of brings me to what I wanted to talk about regarding the cucumbers that I'm a little worried about, the radishes that we're gonna go back to. So the radishes have had spotty leaves most of the time they've been in the ground. Matter of fact, I'll give you a close-up real quick. You can see the leaves. They're pretty holy. And that got way worse over the last couple days. So I came back to the radishes 2 days ago and I noticed a darker green smudge on one of the leaves. And when I went over to inspect, I noticed that it was a caterpillar. It was like a very, very similar colored caterpillar. I'll throw it on screen. And it blended in almost perfectly. And I knew once it got close and I saw all the droppings that that's what had been causing all the spotty leaves. And I got rid of it and I was like, wow, that guy must have been on there for a really long time, because those things have been in there for what, a month? And they've just been continually getting a little bit worse at a time, because I'd never seen them initially. And then today I came back and I noticed they just weren't doing well, like worse than yesterday. And I got really close and I started just picking through all the leaves and all the stems, and I found 2 more of those caterpillars. Now, I looked through everything. I didn't see any more than those, but they'll probably be back. And I don't know if many of those radishes will make it, but we'll see. Plants are surprisingly strong. They love to grow. So we'll see what happens. I'll take care of those and try and hand pick all the caterpillars. But let's talk about the cucumbers and the zucchini, because they both have the same issue. When I came back this morning, this cucumber plant over here was looking a little bit depressed, and one of its leaves had sunk down and was wilted and had some holes in it. Now, I noticed that there were 2 of these guys on it. I thought I squished both of them. Apparently, I did not. I killed one, and now I killed 2, but I don't know if those were what the issue was, because I was looking on this cucumber plant, which is closer, and I found this. So these are you serious? I dropped it, but you guys saw what I meant. I think those are called cucumber beetles. I'll have to look that up and make sure, and they cause a lot of damage to cucumbers, and that could have been what caused that one over there to wilt. And this zucchini plant over here also has those beetles. Let me see if I can find one. The leaves last night took some noticeable damage. You can see this one right here. It's like fallen off and dead and rotten now. I don't know how that happened, because everything was doing super, super well. And now I have pest problems, which is, I think, very standard in organic farming. And I'm gonna have to look into and find some ways to get rid of these pests, because I want my crops to produce. But now that we've gone over the pests, let's talk about what didn't grow and what I put in after the fact. All right, so I already showed you those 3 tomato plants over there by the cucumbers that I'd put in, but I also put 3 more right here, here, and here. This one was almost dead when I put it in, but it seems to have produced some green leaves, so I think that'll grow. So we'll have 3 more tomato plants here. Over here in the lettuce garden, I put more lettuce plants. There's 2 right here, 1 right here, 2 right here, and I think that's just 1 right here. The reason there's 2 there and 2 there is because they both germinated, and I figured I'd give them a shot and see if they could both grow. Well, those are doing well. They've already grown significantly since I put them in the ground. So I'll get more lettuce from that. And I think they might actually be a different type than this right here, which I forget the name of. But got more lettuce coming in. Also in my garden with that large zucchini plant right here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's another small one behind the zucchini plant. Squash plants that are coming in that these were also planted from seed, and my father had some extra ones that were just gonna sit in the pot. So I was like, all right, well, I got a whole bunch of space where mine didn't germinate. So I will just throw them in the ground, and they're doing really well. They've already, in the past week or so, they've put up probably 5 new leaves each. Well, these 2 did. These have grown at least 2 new ones, and these have grown at least 2 new ones since they were put in the ground. So I'm super happy about that because I love squash, and I was really bummed that mine did not grow. Beside those squash that didn't grow, my sugar snap peas did not grow, but I learned that's because they're a cold weather plant. Should have known that when I went to it. They didn't grow, never germinated. My jalapeno plants did not germinate. Those were behind the radishes. And then my squash. Other than that, my corn didn't germinate, and probably about a quarter of my cucumbers germinated, but at least they did. That being said, some things happened. So my grandfather is in not great condition, and his entire life he has gardened just a ton. He felt inspired despite being in poor condition. So he went out and transplanted a ton of Swiss chard that had grown up into his garden into pots and sent them my way, and they were just gonna sit in pots. We didn't really have a spot to put them, so I did something. Remember the portion that I didn't clear above my garden? Yep, I cleared it. So I pretty much just made a makeshift deer fence to keep the deer out. This one won't keep anything smaller out because obviously there's giant holes in the fence. And let's check out how the crops in here are doing. The Swiss chard is, for the most part, all doing super, super well. This was all probably 1 or 2 leaves. Every single plant was like 1 or 2 small leaves when they were put in the ground, and I wasn't expecting a ton of them to make it because this soil, I didn't do anything to it. It's unprepared, it's clay soil, super tough to grow things in, except for vines because they seem to prosper. But for the most part, everything is doing well. I think out of the initial 40 plants I put in of Swiss chard, 39 of them are still growing. These 2 had some sort of damage happen to them, so they're really small. I'm not sure if this one's gonna make it. This one definitely will, super small. I don't know if you can see it. But all up here and in here is Swiss chard. That stuff, it's a little more shady, so it's not growing as well as all of this. But I'll give you guys a little close-up of the chard. That's the small one I'm talking about that might not make it. That one should make it still. And then all this is Swiss chard. So we're gonna be eating a lot of Swiss chard, which is fine by me because I very much enjoy it. Now, my brother and sister-in-law also had a bunch of extra crops that they had in pots. Really stringy tomato plants that I didn't think were gonna make it. They were probably about a foot long and had like 2 leaves on them each, which meant that they had been in low light growing conditions. So they were reaching for the light. That's what it means when you have really long skinny stems that can't support the weight of the plant. But I planted every single one of them about 6 to 8 inches deep, because tomato stems can grow roots when they're planted deep in the ground. And guess what? Look at them now. Boom. For reference, here's my arm. Boom. This is actually probably, well, this one might be my biggest one. But almost, I think all but one of them actually came up. It is starting to sprinkle and there's some rain clouds blowing in, so I gotta wrap this up. But aside from the tomatoes that there will be a ton of, the Swiss chard that there will be a ton of, I've got 3 pepper plants, 3 eggplant plants, and 3 plants of a type that I have not identified, so that's gonna be a bit of a surprise. But that is the current condition of my garden. I'm loving it. This has been super fun, and seeing everything grow has been very down to earth and wonderful. That's gonna conclude this video. I am gonna make a 3rd installment of my small garden series, and it's gonna be probably around harvest season, which might be a couple different time periods, but I'll probably just throw them in one video, and we're gonna see what we get from the earth. Stay you, stay true, stay sick. Peace. See you in the next one, guys.